Yeah.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight. I know you've all obviously been reading our newsletter, otherwise you wouldn't have found out about our meeting for this evening. Those of you who may not be a member of our website, I'd like you to fill in some forms at the end. If you do that, make sure you very meticulously write your email address, because some of the things we get now and again, we can't read them, so that's our only way of contacting you. We're lucky tonight to have a speaker here from all the way from Arizona, and his record, I've spent about a good half hour with him before we came in here, and his background is quite remarkable. He could do a whole hour on his family history. His father was a Medal of Honor recipient in World War II, one of the few airmen who received that honor, which is quite fascinating to hear him talk about that. But anyway, his talk tonight will be on the A-26, or the B-26 as we call it outside now, our little invader aircraft. Anyway, he was brought here by his very good friend and attorney, Kane.
Nearing.
I was close. Anyway, very kindly, and he has a very fine presentation. It'll be open for questions. He covers everything from D-Day onwards, all the way to the Korean War. So I'd like you to give him a big hand, and he'll be open for questions.
Good evening, and thank you for coming.
Good evening.
I understand it's dripping rain out there. Anyway, tonight I'm going to quickly delve into my background a little bit in World War II. I was fortunate enough to be one of the D-Day Pathfinders. We had 20 crews who led the invasion of Normandy with the paratroopers as far as the Americans were concerned.
Tell them what Pathfinder is.
Pathfinders went in and dropped specially trained paratroopers who were equipped with radar, lights that only shot in one direction, and panels. And it was a day-night operation, but we dropped at night in Normandy and in the south of France, where half of us went down to lead that. There was no other night operation as far as paratroopers were concerned. The south of France was the last one.
Bring them across the channel now for D-Day.
Yeah. D-Day,
I got to explain to you that Dave has really good notes, but we just brought the notes for the Korea presentation, but the guys said we'd really like to hear World War II, so I'm being his notes. Just reminding him. So,
she reminded me, yeah.
So let's bring them across the channel.
Well, we went across the channel in 3 shift formations attached to each drop zone. There were 9 airplanes assigned, 3, 3, and 3 to the 101st, 3, 3, and 3 to the 82nd, 2 airplanes flown by former sergeant pilots at Pearl Harbor who were with us as captains. They were to illuminate paratroopers dropping on the glider drop zones, of which there were 2. So we went in, the 101st led and dropped first. In our trip over, we had a wonderful flight from our base at North Witham up in the Midlands down to Portland Bill. Across the channel we dropped down. To get below German radar, we went down to right above the water. We pulled up when we hit the turn.
How many planes were flying with you when you crossed the channel?
We crossed the channel, 3 planes. 3 planes. 1 flight of Vs. And there was another flight of Vs and another flight of Vs, as I explained, for the 82nd, and 3 more for the 101st. 101st had gone in ahead of us. Their timing was about 15 minutes different than ours. They were not able to break, as we were not able to break, radio silence. We crossed the peninsula of Normandy on the west side, going toward the east, and over the area where we were going to drop, what was there? A cloud bank. The base of the cloud bank was at about 850 feet, and it went up to 1,500 feet. Nobody could break radio silence, although the colonel, who was in the first flight of Vs over with the 101st, could have and should have. it would have saved an awful lot of people, probably.
Okay, so you were over the water, low level.
Low level.
You hit the shore, then what?
Hit the shore, went up, pulled into formation, going into the IP, and went into the fog, into the cloud bank. I pulled a little bit away, and then my navigator said, "Don't move, we're perfect." So I dropped down, and bingo, we broke out at about 800 feet. He said, "Green light."
And what did you see when you came out of the clouds? What was the condition then?
Condition then was clear. The bombing in Cherbourg, north of us, and there was a fire going between Cherbourg and us, which we figured the RAF had done something there, maybe.
And the moon?
The moon was full.
So what was the visibility?
Visibility was superb, both ways, up and down. Unfortunately, both ways, up and down. Yeah. So we dropped our paratroopers who went out very fast. I had 18 paratroopers and my stick, and they got out of the plane in 13 seconds.
Can you drop paratroopers at 800 feet?
107 miles an hour indicated.
You can drop them at 400 feet. My dad did at Corregidor.
Yeah.
This is a photo of the crew that he dropped
Yeah.
on D-Day right before they flew the mission. And we brought a bunch of them, so if you want one, he'll sign one for you. Okay, so Dave, what kind of resistance did you have? Did
We
you have
had
any?
a tremendous amount of resistance from the ground from 25 caliber machine pistol, with the exception of 2 shots from approximately a 20 millimeter cannon that shot off my left wingtip and hit the magnetos up here where the windshields and all your switches in a DC-3, C-47 airplane turn your engine on. That paid off later badly because I couldn't turn the engines off without turning the gas off. But anyway, I immediately, when they got the static lines from the paratroopers into the plane, the crew chief came up and said, "All set." We were on a perfect course, and my navigator was back, and he said, "Great, no problem." My co-pilot announced, "Better lift your right wing. We're going to hit the steeple at the chapel in St. Mary Glees." So we lifted our wing, and my navigator gave me a course for an island. If you look at a map of the Normandy Peninsula, there's an island called Marcouf right off the Normandy, northern Utah beach area. And I could remember in my mind being told to avoid Marcouf because it had anti-aircraft guns and big guns that they were going to enfilade any beaches that were landed on. We went over Marcouf, nothing, absolutely nothing. Found out about 2 weeks later that the underwater demolition team of the United States Navy, the precursor of the SEALs, had gone in and taken care of business.
Okay, so now you're flying across.
Flying across, we're coming up to the point where we have to head back across a westerly direction to go back into England. And my navigator says, "Come back here and take a look at this screen." We had a PPI scope, which was like a mirror in a way, showed everything on the ground. You could walk, it looked as if you could walk from England to the Bay of Normandy, the Omaha Beach Bay area, on the dots, the number of ships. It was unbelievable. My co-pilot also got the chance to look at it. We made the trip back by ourselves. We landed and found that we were 45 seconds difference in dropping our paratroopers from our lead 2 planes, the lead plane, our flight commander, and the left wing plane. 45 seconds. I had to turn the engines off, as I said, that way.
What was your accuracy on your drop, Dave?
100%. 100%. And the same was true of all the other drop zones. The colonel...
For the Pathfinders.
Pathfinders, yeah. The Pathfinders did it, but our colonel who had a navigator that wasn't tremendously interested in radar. He was an old 19th bomb navigator, nice guy, but he made the colonel had to make a 360-degree turn over the drop zone, and he and my plane came back and looked like sieves.
How many holes do you have in your plane?
I had over 300 total holes in my airplane.
So,
Little tiny ones, and when they repaired it, it looked like it had measles.
okay, Dave, on the screen up there, they show a C-47 and a B-24. What were you doing flying B-24s?
Well, I'll tell you, we were taking a lot of gas a little later to General Patton, and we used to take it in C-47s in jerry cans. And then all of a sudden, they got the idea, oh, old war weary B-24s with a big rubber bladder in them, 3 of them. And they could take over and go directly into the tank. And one B-24 carried what 11 C-54s could carry in gas. C-47, excuse me.
Okay, we're gonna fast forward through your
Yeah.
program. Now tell them about Southern Friends.
We sent 10 crews. I was fortunate enough to be picked as one to go down to Italy to lead the South of France invasion, Operation Dragoon, going into the, and letting that army eventually come up from the south and join the armies that Eisenhower had taken across the Normandy and Udall beaches. We went down, it was very quick, and I happened to draw the short straw, and the next day I flew my mission in daylight, and I dropped British paratroopers in what became known as the Champagne Campaign.
Because
There was no enemy anticipation of what we were doing. We didn't have any airplanes lost. No planes were hit by anti-aircraft. There was a little bit of anti-aircraft, but it came later. The boys landed at the 5 drop zones in the south of France, and the Champagne came in the para-racks. Pathfinders could not carry para-racks because of the fact we had this great big radome in the belly, and it was surrounded with a big plastic tub. And so you couldn't put the para-racks in there.
tell them about the radar on your aircraft.
Yeah, we had a little radar in our plane. We had SHORAN, LORAN, Rebecca Eureka, radar antenna, and altimeters. And then we had the PPI scope, the SCR 717, which the B-17s used high altitude for bombing. We used it for navigation.
Did any other C-47s have that radar?
No, only the Pathfinders.
And where were your navigators trained?
Our navigators were trained by the Royal Air Force, all of them. And the radar was mostly British developed and American manufactured.
And the cost?
Well, we had a $100,000 airplane with $500,000 worth of radar. And everybody used to say, it's got to be a Pathfinder plane. Look at the guards around it. We couldn't go to an airport. I had 2 Thompson submachine gunners in my airplane, in my crew. And I never flew without my 45, neither did any other member. So we...
Tell them about coming home from Southern France.
Coming home from southern France, we flew from our base in Italy to Gibraltar, spent the night, got up, and then the next day flew up during the night from Gibraltar to England, landed, gassed, had breakfast, and then we got a weather briefing. And I use the weather briefing term with a certain amount of derision because about 45 minutes after we took off from Newquay to go to our base, a wild cold front came in from the Irish Sea. We lost 3 airplanes that day from the point of view of crashing. I was one of them. I crashed my plane, but it was raining so hard and the wind was blowing so badly that we just went into wet mountains in south of near Barnstable in England, south of the Bristol Channel, and the radar acted like a plow and stopped us from going over a precipice. That was nice.
Any casualties of that crash?
The only casualty I had was 3 cases of rather not very expensive Italian wine.
Okay, fast forward to market. You're getting the World War I.
Getting the
version
very quick
fast.
World War I.
Okay, Market Garden.
Market Garden was the invasion of Holland. It was called Montgomery's Big Deal. And if you remember, the 101st Division landed at Eindhoven. The 82nd Division landed at Nijmegen Grave. And the British 6th Division ended, unfortunately, up at Arnhem. And that turned out to be a disaster.
And what did you fly?
I flew the 316th troop carrier leading the 82nd Airborne into Nijmegen. And I did 5 missions, 4 of them dropping paratroopers, and one of them I went in to take out some very badly wounded people, took them immediately back to the hospital in England.
We forgot to tell them about one of the requirements from the 82nd Airborne before you flew D-Day.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. The requirement is a Pathfinder. It didn't have anything to do really with the 82nd.
Yeah.
We got repaid by 82nd. Our colonel had a proviso. 2 things happened to you when you went into Pathfinders. They tore up your instrument card, and you pilots know what that would mean. To anybody else, it means that you could fly instruments at a certain level. And he said, I will fly with you before D-Day and give you a new instrument card. Turned out it was colored green, and they were reserved mostly for pilots who had stars above their wings or command pilots, very senior.
How old were you when you flew D-Day?
D-Day was 21. I was 22 for the south of France.
What about your jump wings? I wanted you tell them about earning your jump wings.
And the colonel said, oh, General Gavin of the 82nd Airborne is coming over tonight for dinner. And we all said, oh, wonderful, we'd all like General Gavin. And he was the deputy commander of the 82nd Airborne. And he said he wanted to meet all the aircraft commanders from D-Day after dinner. So we went in private room after dinner. He said, gentlemen, I want to present you with your pilot parachute bug. And he presented each of us with the parachute wings, but he put it on us the way the parachutists do, pushing it right in you.
But he made you jump. You had to jump qualify.
We
Yeah.
jumped with our crew of paratroopers in practice before D-Day.
All right.
Every aircraft commander dropped with the stick he was going to drop in combat.
And my favorite mission, Bastogne.
Bastogne came in December. After December 16th at the breakthrough, the weather was stinking. It was covered, England was covered with ice. And we finally got a break and went down to Membry, where my old 436 troop carrier group was. Across the field from them was a big, monstrous air materiel warehouses. And we loaded up airplanes in medical supplies, food, and medical supplies. I got the boys going, and Major Jacobson, later Colonel Jacobson, who was the operations officer, said, Hamilton, take the first guys you can get. You go over, I'll catch up with you later. He did. He caught up with us after we were out. I took 27 planes into Bastogne, and some brilliant second lieutenant in 9th Air Force Intelligence put us down a road with the German Panzer Division on it, and they were unfriendly. And I said to the boys, I said, we're going to slide over to the right and drop down. So right above the ground, we went into Bastogne, pulled up to about 350, 400 feet, and dropped the parachutes. We didn't drop any men. All we were dropping was the supplies. I took over 27 planes. I took 9 back to England. We lost 2 planes very close to the drop zone. The 101st broke into those planes, rescued the crews, blew the airplanes up, which was required with all that radar on them. The rest of the planes eventually got back to England, but they had wounded aboard, or they had engine trouble, or they had something wrong with them. They eventually got back, but the 9 planes that got back from Bastogne into England, we were pretty beat up. And Christmas, as you know, came the next day, so
So,
that's the story
Yeah,
of
that's-
World War II.
that's
as far
World
as
War II at a
I'm
high load.
concerned.
so after World War II, you flew civilian. So-
I did. I joined a airline, and I was flying 47s, C-54s, and you in those days could not get your air transport rating flying with a non-scheduled airline. So I joined up and said, I've got to go to get a scheduled airline. I wanted to get my air transport rating. So I joined up with American Overseas Airlines, which was flying Constellations to Frankfurt, Germany, across the North Atlantic. And I flew as the co-pilot on a lot of those missions with 10 days to 12 days out and 10 to 12 days back home before you went on another one. I flew with Charlie Blair. Anybody remember that name? Two things. He flew a P-51 from Nome, Alaska across the North Pole to England and discovered what the jet stream and pressure patterns were, which later became the way all the airlines flew, pressure patterns, take advantage. But he was married to Maureen O'Hara. Very, very lovely lady.
Tell me about this
And-
guy.
Bob Lewis went through school with me to get my ATR. Now, Bob Lewis was the co-pilot on the Enola Gay. And he was married to a lady that's family were in the candy business. He flew with us for only 2 years, and then he went into the candy business. I couldn't blame him. We took our exams together. The exam for ATRs, I don't know if it's still the same, but 6-hour meteorology, 6-hour navigation, 3 hours international air regulations, 5 hours, the airplane, everything to do with it. Electrical, hydraulics, engines, everything.
Okay,
But before,
now you're back on the service.
back in the service in Korea, and I was brought back in through the Machiavellian planning of General Cuter of Matz and my father in the Pentagon building. And they said, oh, he's been flying Connies for 5 years. General Eisenhower is coming back out of Columbia University to be the Supreme Commander of NATO. He'd be perfect for that. Well, they didn't check with me. I said, I'd never see my wife again. I was relatively newly married, wanting to start a family, the whole business. So I said to General Cuter, I said, if I can get a replacement, will you accept it? He said, oh, sure, no problem. So I knew of General Charlie Draper was flying for General K.B. Wolfe in a Constellation. And he was head of Materiel Command, 4 stars. So Charlie Draper agreed. They delivered the Lockheed to Washington National Airport, where we were based. And Charlie and I flew it up to the Lockheed Eastern Air Maintenance Terminal at Idlewild Airport, now known as JFK. And we left the plane there, and 3 months later it was turned over
Where is she now?
to Columbine 1. Columbine 1 is now down in the Pima Air Museum in Tucson. And I saw her down there. They wouldn't let me touch her, but I didn't want to go to Europe. And I told Dad, and Charlie Draper was perfectly willing to fly the General. And he went all the way to Air Force One with Ike as president, got to be a brigadier general, and used to be very kind and send me a Christmas card. I don't get those anymore. But I helped set up the air evacuation of the wounded from Korea. And we had an airline set up that went from Travis Air Force Base through San Antonio, up to Andrews, and then dispersed into C-47s, so that within limits, we set the wounded as close, commensurate with their wound and sickness, to their homes. And we did that, I did it for almost 2 years. And 2.5 years, you had to come up for an overseas tour. So I went in and I said, I want to talk to the brains and officers, personnel. And they said, oh yeah, you can go to France for 3 years. Your wife can join you over there after a year, maybe. And I said, what else? He said, the quickest way over and back, go to Korea, 50 missions in a B-26, and you're home again in 7 months. I said, I'll be back tomorrow morning and let you know. I checked with my wife, and she said, yeah. I went back the next morning, I said, put me on the list. So we went to Langley Field, and we were there in Langley Field for almost 2 months, learning to fly the B-26, which in World War II had been called the A-26, the Douglas Invader. How lucky can you be to fly 2 wars in Douglas equipment with Pratt & Whitney engines? Pretty good. We did our training in gunnery, which I'd never had because, after all, flying C-47s, as I told you, no guns. Level bombing, dive bombing, and strafing. All, to me, very exciting. I just loved the 26 because it was faster and it had lots of guns. In April, I went to Korea, and just as I went to England, I was able to fly an airplane to Korea. Most people went over airlines, but there were 9 B-26s had come out of being refitted, restressed the wings, all painted and fresh and new and everything. 9 of them, and they wanted them delivered to Korea. So a bunch of us were volunteered by being told, you will go. We met a B-29 navigational plane over the Farallon Islands, flew to Hawaii, spent the night. Next day, flew to Wake Island, spent the night, flew on to Haneda, where we lost the B-29. He went on to do whatever he was going to do. And we went down to Iwakuni, and I knew things were getting serious. They put ammunition in the guns. I said, oh, yeah, okay. Well, we went over. I arrived in Busan, down in the very southern part of Korea, on this day, 2 days after it had become the 17th Bomb Group. Paperwork. The 452nd Bomb Wing Reserve from Long Beach, California, had been over there a year. And they were through. Bingo, in we come. Well, when you get to Busan, I had over 4,000 hours of flying at that time. I was a senior pilot, star over my wings. I reported into a squadron that I didn't know anybody, and the colonel who commanded the squadron, Rhodes Elam, he had a star over his wings, but I had a lot more flying time than he did. But I was made flight leader and assistant operations officer after I completed my $3 rides and was put on orders as combat ready. So the dollar rides were a kickback to the days when, I think in the old days, you gave your instructor $1 for a ride. Well, the first dollar ride, local orientation, where the bombing range was that we used to go to, do this and that. And, well, the mountains were like around us. The second dollar ride, and remember, you had ground school every day in the training too. The second dollar ride, we went on an orientation ride up to the 3rd Bomb Group at Suwon. We went to K-46, we went to a few other bases, and back home down across the Marine base at Pohang. Pohang was the nearest big air base near us. And Ted Williams was there, the great baseball player who'd flown in World War II and in Korea. And he brought his baseball team down to our field. And I'd been on a mission. I came back and went over to see how they were doing. I think the score was 22-2 or something like that. But he was a real gent, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy. The only time I ever met him, but I still, in my estimation, he was the greatest hitter ever was. And Willie Mays was right after he was, believe me. Mission 3 was an actual combat mission, the dollar ride. You had an instructor, of course, again, sitting in the right seat. We went on a recce run on a ride. Unfortunately, we had no chance to drop any bombs or fire any guns. It was just a mission. But I got credited with my first mission, was my third dollar ride. We went on orders then to be combat ready, and that's when I was made B-Flight Commander and Assistant Operations Officer. And I was assigned an airplane. Sweet Miss Lillian. My wife's name was Lillian. We always called her Mitzi, but she had a beautiful pop-pop. And the picture that was painted on the side of the airplane, yeah, glass nose B-26, and occasionally I flew a solid nose airplane, but that was only when I went on strafing missions and stuff.
Where is that airplane?
That airplane's supposed to be right out here, but I went out, doesn't have anything that I remember, no number on the tail.
But it is your airplane.
That's what they say.
All right.
Yep. The squadron flew B-26s, 22 glass nose, and we had 6 or 7 solid noses. 2 airplanes with Loran, instead of the gun turrets in the back, there were twin 50s up and back and down in the models with the 50s. And they were used to decoy B-29s, and the Chinese radar would pick them up, MiGs would be deployed, and then the 86s would go after the MiGs. And we later found out that they called them they call these wild weasels missions. We called them hunter-killer, where 2 airplanes work together. And the solid nose could do those missions just as well as the glass nose. But in the glass nose airplanes, the pilot, the gunner in the back, up and down twin 50s, the navigator bombardier, 1 person, located in the glass nose of the airplane. He had a Norden sight. We took the Norden gun sight out after about 12 missions and put in a British low-level sight. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was a delightful thing to work with and easier to operate and quicker than the Norden. Yep. Bombardier navigator had control of the airplane from the initial point to the bomb release point. I had the control of setting the intervalometer, which was the time between the bombs would go, and they went out in a certain order, and the wing, they all could go together, or they would be gone separately or individually. So the solid nose became known as the ditch diggers. They had 8 50s or 6 50s in the nose, plus the 3 50s in the wings, plus the 2 50s up and the 2 50s down in the back. You could dig quite a hole with those. Yeah. In those cases, the solid nose, the navigator bombardier sat next to you in the seat. And the nice thing about that was that you didn't need to talk to him on the radio. You could talk to him almost just big. Yeah. There's a picture up of my airplane before I took it over, and it had the L on the tail. I had a big white B put on it for B flight. And on the other side, I had that wonderful picture of sweet Miss Lillian. I went out to look at the plane here. It doesn't have the numbers on the tail. It has a B, small B up at top. No sweet Miss Lillian. I don't know.
They're going to fix it. I know they're going to fix it.
Fixing it isn't that easy. Well, the 3 caliber, 50 calibers in each gun on the wings, 400 yards bore sighted. To some people that may seem excessive, but I didn't want to get too close to the target at low level, you know what I mean? And then they were not all sighted into the same distance if it was your choice. Every pilot had a different idea of how he wanted his guns bore sighted, especially the solid nose jobs. And then we had a wonderful thing that we got from the Navy, 5-inch high velocity rockets and we could put 3 of them under each point, plus a 500-pounder under each wing. Those were fun, because they didn't recoil anything. They went off with a swish and left a tail. You could see it for hours. And they did a tremendous amount of damage. You can imagine it had 100 pounds in the nose of explosive. The gunner fired all the double rear turret guns separately or individually, depending, it was CFC. He could fight at different targets or at the same target. And I had the control of dropping the bombs in case of a salvo. I could release them armed or unarmed. And the nose and wing guns were bore sighted to different distances. The pilot had different preferences, and I used the gun sights to differences depending upon the target. And it made a difference. We had one mission, I don't know if this is where it is. Not quite. I'll get to it. Yeah. The gunner's turret in the back aircraft facing backwards. The seat could be rotated to face in any direction, but usually watching my back. Charlie Goss was my gunner, and he was a wonderful guy and a character. And there were 800 rounds per gun on the ship. Gave you quite a lot of ammo. You didn't just sit there and hold the target down. You would flip, flip, flip. And solid nose aircraft, the pilot fired those. I never had a jam. In all the missions I flew, I never had my guns jammed. Speaks awfully well for Charlie and for the ordnance people back at the base. And remember, we had no hangar. And all the maintenance, all the work on the airplanes was done outside in the weather, day or night, rain or shine. If you wanted to have an engine change, you went to Miho, Japan. Every 5th round in machine guns we had, and I'm sure everywhere, were a tracer. You could see where you were shooting. And especially at night, it was marvelous tracking and seeing where you were shooting. In the daytime, it would light up like that.
What percentage of the 50 missions you flew were night missions?
Yeah, I would think probably 35 to 40.
Out of 50?
Out of 50, yeah. Yep. If it was a solid, if it was going to be a strafing run, I always tried to grab myself a solid nose airplane. But my crew of Charlie Goss and Nathan Kildall, who I went overseas, took him overseas, but he got me lost on my 9th mission.
He was your navigator.
He was a bombardier navigator. He got me lost, and so I said, Charlie, I'm going to get rid of Nate Kildall. You got anything to add to it? He said, no. So I got rid of Kildall. Actually, I did him a favor. I put him in a squadron, and he actually got through his 50 missions faster than I did. Because on every 4th night, I had to be assistant group operations. They volunteered me for that. You know what a volunteer is, don't you? The maintenance crews we had were the absolute best. A lot of them were old-timers and regular Air Force guys. And there were no hangars, as I said. And flying over to Miho in Japan meant there were hangars, a very good PX, officers club, train station. I used to get on the train and go over and, oh, we got a note here. Oh yeah, let's talk about some missions. Ah, yes. Tadpoles. Anybody here heard of a tadpole mission? Tadpole mission is when you're flying under instruments, you don't know what you're bombing, usually with 16,000 feet, you're completely controlled by radar on the ground, a truck, and they had the target, they knew the bomb load you were carrying, told you what intervalometer they wanted you to set, and tell you when to release the bombs. You never saw the ground, you never saw the target, you were flying instruments the whole time. I remember one tadpole mission of the 3 I flew. I took off on instruments from Busan. I went on a GCA landing, as every landing, wherever you went in Busan to K9, you made a GCA landing whether the sun was out, the moon was out, cloud, rain. They got so good at doing it, and you got pretty good at listening and believing what they were saying. But we never knew the results of our tadpoles until later. They'd report to you whether they were really accurate. And you were not maybe the only plane on that particular tadpole that night. An hour later, there might have been another plane being picked up by identically the same controller, the same altitude, and the same target. You'd have no way of knowing. But the radar truck on the ground was controlled, but getting there was controlled by Shirley. Now, Shirley is not a cute little blonde-haired girl. Shirley was the code name for 5th Air Force Combat Command north of the bomb line. No plane went north of the bomb line in any area of North Korea or its waters without Shirley knowing you, clearing you in, and
What's
you
the bomb line?
check it. The bomb line is a line that was 100 yards minimum in front of the American or foreign or friendly troops. And it changed sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. But Shirley always knew where it was and never got you into trouble. They would always direct you in and out. And on tadpole missions, Shirley directed us to the radar truck, and then the truck took over for the mission, and then Shirley directed you home. Because when you got out from the tadpole, you went right back out. Shirley would put you back on your heading to go back home. I'm going to tell you about some other types of missions we fly. And there's a picture up here. Maury Walton. Maury Walton, if he'd have shot down, could have opened a store. He had more escape and things he could use in being shot down. And he finished up his missions about a month ahead of me and went home with a big grin on his face. And I always said, I don't want to carry all that. So I had a pretty good escape in my backpack, which was foam rubber, because we sat on our parachute.
What did you carry for escape?
Small bottles of Smirnoff.
Okie doke.
I had a Swiss Army knife in my pocket. I had a few other things, especially maps. Not the maps you see on the table back there. We had issued some maps that you could eat. They were made out of rice paper, and they were strictly North Korea, Chinese border. But as they were picking up pilots in Vietnam later, with greater success, they picked up a few because the helicopter was just starting to really come into service in Korea.
Did you have any pilot friends that were shot down while you were there?
I had one who shot down Pete Britton.
Oh, well, okay.
He
But
got
not one that was shot down and rescued?
No,
Okay.
no. General Van Fleet's son flew in our squadron. He got shot down and was captured and got released when after the armistice in July of '73. That war, by the way, is still technically going on, you know. They haven't signed a peace treaty. And they say we've been in Afghanistan for 17 years. How many years have we been in Korea? All I know is I don't want to go back. But we used to go on aerial night recce missions, reconnaissance missions with the heart and soul of our operation at night. And we were looking for tucks, tracks, convoys, boats. Well, one boat anyway.
How did you find those guys in the dark? How did you find them?
Oh, reflections, flares. We'd drop flares and stay above the flare. If you saw trucks on the road, or if they had headlights that they turned out and left a little glimmer before they dulled out, you could go and get them. But we always got rid of our bombs first. If you had rockets, you got rid of those second, because you didn't want to go down and strafe with any bombs you'd overstress your wings and the airplane.
When you were out hunting trucks and stuff, did you get shot at?
Yeah, oh yeah, you get shot at from the reaches too. From the ground, about every fifth, certain wrecky routes, you'd get surprised by a bunch of trucks, and the fifth truck would be a flak truck. Just like in the trains. I'll tell you a little bit later about the trains. You drop a parachute in place and then you decide whether you're going to bomb or strafe. It all depended upon what ordnance you had aboard. You never strafed until the ordnance was gone. Yep. Sometimes we took fire from the convoys, from the ridges, both sides, because all these roads had ridges on them sides. But we got results. 17th Bomb Group flew both day and night missions. The 37th Bomb Squadron mostly flew night missions.
That's who you flew with.
Right. And the group sometimes flew daylight formation bombing missions, such as bombing mines. Koreans had a lot of mines, and they used to hide all kinds of stuff in there, and then they'd put North Koreans in there with A-frames, take them out, and they'd walk from the mine to the front line. We had one of our first daylight missions when we were the 17th bomb was a cement plant. And the cement plant, the picture on the left is before, this is after. We did a pretty good job on that one. Unfortunately, the next daylight formation mission was a pretty bad one. We went on Saruman Airport, which was a daylight bombing mission to bomb the runway. It was the 55th mission for Corporal Mormon, who was the gunner on the mission, and he wanted to fly his last mission with me. He's the guy next to me in the picture. And he said, I'll fly with Hamilton because he won't put his nose into a dark hole. I didn't know what that meant.
You apparently didn't do it.
No, I didn't. But we lost our wing commander on this mission. I was flying his right wing as deputy commander. And he had his bomb bay doors open. We'd gone through the initial point. We were about a minute and a half away from bomb release. He had his bomb bay doors open, as we all did. He got a direct hit in the bomb bay by some heavy flak. The plane blew up in a flash of orange, and which meant that it was disintegrated into pieces probably no bigger than a silver dollar. And I landed back after that mission and looked at my airplane. There was nowhere that I could find had a sign of being hit anywhere, which was a miracle. Unfortunately, couldn't believe we were hit in some way, but we weren't. I had to take command of the wing that day to bomb. We did a good job and then got a call after we were turning off the target that the MiGs were coming in. Well, that upset a lot of people. Didn't upset me because I knew exactly what to do. Turn, get the hell out of there, go down on the ground so they can't get under you, and let the fighter escort take care of it, which they did. We never had made fire on any of our daylight formations that day. Yep. The F-86s, we didn't know them all, but boy, we were glad they were there. And we went to the wing commander's interment ceremony at the International Cemetery near our base, and I don't know.
I got to add something. When he gave this presentation at Prescott last week, a gentleman who was a Korean gunner on B-26s
Right.
said that his best friend was on this guy's plane when it was hit.
Yeah,
It's just kind of amazing.
yeah, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next page.
Bob had, in an automobile accident, lost his right leg below his knee. And I said, is that a war wound? He said, yeah, war on the highway. He had a good sense of humor, neat guy.
All right, next page.
This was a very big mission for me. Turning out the lights. We were selected, 3 of us were selected And I think I was mainly selected because of my Pathfinder experience in World War II. 3 B-26s were charged with the mission of bringing in inextinguishable flares to illuminate a target on the Yalu River at a hydroelectric plant that was going to be bombed by the B-29s. They were coming in at 6,000 feet. I went over the mission with the 2 other pilots and the squadron commander, the wing commander, the group commander. And I said, well, what do you think, what altitude? And they said, what are you comfortable with? I said, I think maybe 100 feet. What speed? Oh, like 200, 220. Yeah. In trail? Yes, sir. So it went over, red, white, and blue. Bing, bing, bing. And I must have been good, because my gunner says, ooh, they're blowing the hell out of that place after we left. That hydroelectric plant put out all the lights in North Korea for 2 weeks. The trolley cars didn't run. The lights in the mines didn't run. The street lights didn't run. The house lights didn't run. The runway lights didn't run. They were in the dark for 2 weeks. We had a good time when there were no lights.
What was it? Another kind.
Killing boats. Well, not really. One boat. I was on a recce mission one night, and we went up the recce mission after checking in with Shirley.
What were you looking for?
We were looking for, basically, we were looking for trucks. This is what our main thing was. Made the turn up in Wonsan Harbor. And my navigator said, Dave, there's a boat down there. So I said, oh, let's take a look. So we pulled up, we dropped the flare, stayed above the flare, and there was a patrol boat, probably as big as across this room. And I said, I think we ought to take care of him. So we went in, we put a hole that big at the waterline with the 6 guns on the wings, and my gunner said, Skipper, you've done well, they're sinking, and there are people in the water. So we tacked the boat all right, and my gunner said, let me paint a boat on the side of the plane. I said, I don't think so. Unfortunately, this next picture shows Pete Britton, who I lost. He was an Eastern Airline pilot who was upset at the fact that he'd missed flying combat in World War II. Beautiful pilot. I flew all of his dollar missions with him. He was a neat guy. He came up to me when the full moon one time and he said, I want to go up to, I knew it meant a train, up in the air at the train. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. He said, come on. He was a friend, nice guy. So I gave him the mission. He got shot down that night and got killed, and he took 2 guys with him. I felt bad about that. I still do. But there was nothing I could do to talk him out of it.
Your training missions.
The first one, used to fly in killing trains, was a dicey operation. Got very involved. You'd fly up the northeast coast of from Wonsan up to 50 miles south of Vladivostok. If you know the map at all, that's the end of the Orient Express and Russian. They had lights on up there and everything. The Navy would have a destroyer.
How many planes flew this mission?
Single ship. There were single ship missions at first. You'd go up, you'd circle in the dark, out water of the Navy. They'd send in star shells if a train was coming. How did they know? They sent a team of UDTB SEALs in. They'd put clips on their tracks. Then the boys would come back and get in the rubber boat outside of the surf. And they'd wait until I got a signal. and then they just give a coded message to the destroyer. There was a train coming, whether it was coming from the north or the south. And then they'd call us, they'd fire in star shells, illuminate the area beautifully. And you could go in, and the thing to do is to try and bomb the tunnels so they couldn't get into a tunnel. Well, I got fooled once. They got into a tunnel. But once you get a train in a tunnel, there were tunnels in that route because the mountains had come right down to the water. And there'd be the track. So they had a single track with sidings and periodically, but the trains would come down and they'd run 2 or 3 trains a day or night. They didn't run many in the daytime. After the train was trapped, that was important. Try and get the train to stop. And to do that meant you put a bomb in the front of him and a bomb in the back of him.
And then?
And then you could strafe, bomb, and then you had to leave when you were no more ordnance, and another B-26 would come in and finish the job for you.
About that.
The trains got nasty. About every 5th car, they'd have a flak gun on them. And they were pretty good flak guns. I mean, 20 millimeter, these were not Schmeisers. Machine pistols like the Germans had.
Okay.
I did 3 train killing missions. They were similar but different locations. And once we trapped a train in a tunnel, so we couldn't attack it. But we closed off the tunnel. Now I guess they dug themselves out because the boys reported 2 days later up there that that tunnel was open. Somebody else had trapped the train, and I got called in to finish it off, but it was not fun, that one. That's how people got killed. Anyway, I got on a hunter-killer mission one night when 2 of us were working together against trains and trucks.
Before you go on from trains, did you not receive an award or a medal for the train mission?
Yes, we got a Distinguished Flying Cross for that.
There you go.
Thank you.
I have to ask him or he won't tell me.
I got a call one night coming out with a wingman. We'd been on a hunter-killer trip. And Shirley called me and he said, "How's your gas?" I said, "We've got plenty of gas." He said, "We got a B-29 in trouble. They've been bombing up in Yalu." And he said, "They've blown the nose off. It's out of one engine. There are 3 dead aboard and some wounded. And the pilot is in real trouble. He'd lost his co-pilot, navigator, and bombardier. Those were 3 dead people in the plane." Shirley asked me to go, and they talked to the B-29 and said, "I'm sending a 26 and a wingman to take you south of the bomb line." So we took him, and he was so glad to see us. We actually changed his direction, because if he'd have kept going in the direction he was flying, he would have gone out to sea, and we'd have never heard from him again. But we escorted him south of the bomb line to K-46, which was a field right near Seoul. And he landed there, and they already had the ambulances, they had everything all ready for his landing. I never heard any more about it. That plane, I know, never flew again. But that was it. And we had been flying out of K9 up to this point. And they started to do some repairs.
What was K9?
K9 was an airfield with one rather large strip where the 17th bomb operated out of. One runway. Taxiways. The runway was pierced steel planking covered with tar. And it could get beat up. The mail plane came in every day. We had an air evac plane that came in there for the hospital in Busan. We had all kinds of traffic. And as I say, it got to be the point where they couldn't really fly. There was an airfield, a single strip again, called K1, 8 miles due east of us. But at least we weren't flying over the ammo ships that were unloading if you took off going south out of K9, because that's where the ammo ships unloaded. But they were doing repairs. We went over there, and I did my last 12 missions out of K1. And the tactical departures, and I have them framed, and they're over there on the table, carried the pocket. The group moved over, because there was no landing. All those planes that previously landed over at K9, in addition to our group, landed at K1. So the control tower group and everything, we had SOPs for departures, GCA and approaches, holding and missions,
So,
everything.
just so these folks know, those are the actual
Those are-
documents that you carried in
I
this.
carried them in the pocket, my flying suit down
That
there.
actual flight suit,
Yeah.
while he flew that actual airplane out there on the tarmac.
Yeah,
All right, just so you know.
yeah. One of my last missions was killing searchlights. It was a special mission sent out to find and destroy searchlights on the south bank of the Yalu River that illuminated the B-29s. They would go out and they flew a Loran Arc. Well, the Chinese were pretty smart. They put our POW camps right on that Loran Arc. So any B-29s had to be very careful how they bombed in that area. So the general said, well, I'm going to send some B-29s, 26s in there, fix those searchlights. So you were given 115 square mile. You were the only airplane in that 15 square mile for 15 missions. Minutes,
Mentioned, that's
15 minutes.
the grid up there.
That's
is
the grid.
From that mission.
Yeah. There were 4 pilots from the 37th and 4 pilots from the 3rd bomb, which is the 13th squadron. But the 3rd bomb, and I think we're designated as 17th bomb.
These documents are laying over
Yeah.
there too.
They had a Marine night fighter flying above me, and I later learned that he had been shot down. I never did find out whether he was killed or a POW. But to get shot down at night meant that somebody in a MiG had to have had guts enough, because they didn't like to fly at night. But we found some nights and we blew them out. The thing about a big searchlight is when they turn off, there's still a glow for quite a while on that bulb in the middle, that hot area.
So why would they turn them off?
They turned them off because they
They heard you coming?
heard me come. And I think they knew what I was trying to do too. But we got some with the bombs and we got some with the machine guns. But we weren't allowed outside that 15 square miles because maybe somebody else was over there. I think maybe one of those other guys, who knew? Then we got the hell out of there and went home. Kenny Papasan, Kenny Harmon, wonderful guy, he took over my job from B-Flight and Assistant Operations when my missions were up. And I came home via commercial airline, Flying Tigers, Tokyo, Wake Island, Hawaii, Travis Air Force Base. Having flown a 26 over, it was nice to fly back in a DC-7 or 6 with a stewardess and food. Very comfortable. And gentlemen, if there are any questions, I do my best to answer them.
Great
Dave,
job.
did you get out of Korea before you saw winter? Or did you catch winter going in? Or?
Well, no, I started my missions at the end of June, and I flew missions to the end of October. So we had some cold weather, yeah. But we didn't have any, no. Some of the area we went into had snow, yeah, but not down where we were, no.
Back up to that First indication of icing in the Douglas A-26.
My first invitation, I don't think I ever had any icing that no. I hit quite a bit in the Constellation, crossing the North Atlantic. I got taught how to handle ice. But I tell you, if you can't handle ice, don't fly instruments. Because it's a,
Tell them the story about what happened when that guy with really bad haircut over there in Korea was sending up some nukes about a year and a half or so ago, and everybody was worried about things escalating, and Dave had visitors. Tell them about your visitors.
oh, yeah. My phone rang one day in Prescott Valley, and the guy said, Colonel Hamilton? I said, yes, sir. He said, I'm with the government and I'd like to talk to you. And I said, do you have my address? And he said, yes. And I said, I'll be home at the time. He came over, two guys introduced himself. One was from the FBI, the other was from the CIA.
Whoops.
So I said to myself, I may have done it, but I will plead not guilty. They said, we have been told that you have some low altitude after mission pictures of targets in North Korea that you bombed. I said, yeah, bomb damage assessment photographs. There was in the B-26, behind the little area where the lower gun was and everything, there was a place for the camera. And they used to change the film in the camera after every mission. You'd take a picture of what your plane did on that mission. I wasn't exclusive with this. This was available to a lot of other planes. But for some reason, somebody told them that I had pictures. And I said, I wished I'd known that they wanted the pictures. I would have had copies made.
And they would not have let you keep them. But what they do, they took them
They
all.
took them, and
Took
I've
'em all.
never seen them. And I remember asking, I wonder if I'll ever get those back in the... They've made, since President Trump is joining in with the President Dictator Commander of North Korea, I don't know whether we'll get a peace treaty signed or not, but some of those targets were of areas that are nuclear plants and mine entrances that are now missile bases. So they've got the pictures. I had the luck to get them. I also had the misluck of losing them.
Can you go through the different variations? There's a World War II B-26 and then a different version. This is a A-26. Could you explain the differences?
In World War II, the B-26 was the Martin Marauder, made at the Glenn Martin plant in Baltimore. And she started out with the nickname of the Baltimore Whore because she had no visible means of support. They put 3 feet more on each wing and it became a much more stable airplane. And they had, somebody had the sense to get a couple of gals from the ladies' Air Force, the WASPs, and they flew B-26 around at a lot of the bases and did single engines on takeoff and that kind of business. And the B-26 ended up the war with the best combat loss ratio of any plane. Now the A-26 was a suppressed Douglas airplane called the Invader.
That's a different aircraft.
Different aircraft completely. The nomenclature became the same after World War II when the Air Force got rid of all the B-26s. Most of them were given to the Navy to turn into torpedo bombers. A lot of them were sold to foreign countries. And, but we never had any more to do with the Martin Marauder. And the A-26 served as an A-26 in World War II B-26 in Korea, B-26K in Nam, and then the French flew it, the Taiwan flew it, I think a lot of other countries flew it. It was a wonderful airplane, forgiving, high performance, yes. You had to know what you were doing. It, if you didn't stay awake, you could get into trouble. Unlike the C-47, but as I said earlier, I just felt so fortunate to fly Douglas airplanes with Pratt & Whitney engines.
Dave, how many World War II pilots did you fly with in Korea?
We at one time had 14. There were 14 pilots who were World War II experienced. Yes, ma'am.
How old were you when you joined the war? And what did you do the first time when you, like, what was your first mission?
How old was I in World War II?
Yeah.
21.
What was your first mission?
My first mission was Normandy.
D-Day.
D-Day, Normandy, yeah. And my last mission was Bastogne on December 23rd. And believe it or not, I had 100 missions. You could fly gasoline over to Patton, who I had gotten to know personally when I was 12 years old. He paid me $25 to hot walk his polo ponies in Hawaii. My mother's house was right above the polo stables. And
And what did he teach you?
he taught me how to swear and how to hot walk a horse, because eventually I played some polo and I turned it over to my daughter, and I didn't have to teach her how to swear. She, by the way, is a veterinary doctor specializing in large animals in Lander, Wyoming. Yes, sir.
Where and when did you leave the Air Force?
I left the Air Force in 1963 after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Can you go down the list of the different aircraft you flew after the 26? Come on, Dave,
No,
let's see
I
you.
don't think I can. No. No,
I'll help you with that. That's another question.
With your B-26 experience, and since you were still in 63, did you have any connection at all to the B-26s that were positioned for the Bay of Pigs?
No, sir. No, no. And that was a shame that they were pulled off that mission. Attorney General Robert Kennedy pulled the Air Force 26s off supporting the Bay of Pigs. That was a disaster, that whole business.
Well, let's see, Dave. I'm going to brag about Dave for a minute, because after the B-26s, he was Air Force Reserve. He flew the B-26s, and then he came home and he flew T-33s, F-80s, F-84s, F-86s. I had to write these down because I can't remember them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, there's that. And he ended his service reading spy photos taken by U-2s, including being in the room with the guys that discovered the nukes on Cuba.
Yeah.
He read that photo.
Yeah.
He was in that room reading that photo.
Because when I left Air Defense Command, the company I was working with in civilian life moved me to Delaware. And so I wanted to keep going in the reserve. So I went to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, and I said, have you got any openings for reserve officers? They said, yeah, we got 2 in Defense Intelligence Agency. I said, yeah, I've heard of them. So he said, standard, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, you know. That was in 61. So in 62, when the Cuban Missile Crisis started, I got recalled to active duty. I told my company, probably only 2 weeks, I was on active duty for 31 days. Company got a little bit about this, but there's nothing I could do about it. I didn't lose my job, but I got the fascination of going to Homestead Field in Florida and being put in a building It had a room half this size, and all I did was look at the U2 films that they'd taken. And of course, they'd have the fellas there with those wonderful editing machines. You just roll them, and they enlarge the pictures, and you could tell shadow, how high they were, what quality they were, what particular where they were, or they were lying down. And they tried like hell to camouflage them. And if we hadn't caught them, Mr. Khrushchev would have had a real shot at blackmail. Because those missiles could have reached anywhere except probably Seattle, Washington. So it was interesting. But I then, having gone through that, and the way my company, the Smirnoff Vodka Company, was growing, and I decided I'd better pay attention to my civilian job. And I had enough time in the military. My wife said, do it, do it. So I did it. Unfortunately, in 1973, we were divorced, and I left the Smirnoff Vodka Company. I had a tremendous amount of stock as bonuses, and also I bought some. It split 11 times in the time I owned it. So I sold some of it after giving, I didn't want to pay my wife alimony, so I gave her a block. And actually I gave her $250,000. 20 years later, when she died, she left each of my children, our children, $1 million. Pretty nice investing.
Any other questions?
Did you only fly out of England or did you fly out of Africa?
We didn't fly any missions out of Africa, but I flew out of Africa just going from Agadir, Morocco up to Casa, and when an engine changed on my airplane, I had to report to get it signed off. So I went into maintenance in Casablanca in there, and there was a captain whose name was Bob Hoover. Well, you know who Bob Hoover was.
This is when you were flying the new aircraft to England, when you first went to England.
Yes, right. And I had the engine changed, but it had to be cleared by, Bob Hoover said, is it okay? I said, yeah, I slow timed it up here, no problem. So he said, we just signed it. He later went and flew Spitfires with the American Air Force, got shot down. Unlike Yeager, he got walked out and couldn't fly back in that theater. Came back to the States, got out, went to work with the people who built the executive, and he used to be in air shows. I remember him to this day. He'd cut the engines right here, and he'd come over, land dead stick, or he'd pick up a handkerchief with his wingtip. He was a sweet pilot, I'll tell you, and a character. Anybody who gives me an okay just by signing his name didn't know what they were doing. Any more questions? Well, I want to thank you tremendously for being patient.
Thank you.